Paul Mescal, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks very much.
Did I get your name right?
You got it spot on. No notes.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. It's.
How did that happen?
I don't know. I think, to be fair, I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. But
You can't pronounce your own name incorrectly.
I know.
It's not a thing.
It's probably 50-50 now in terms of people who pronounce it correctly.
Okay, well, I'm glad to be in the top 50.
Yes, exactly.
Now, tell me about Ridley Scott choosing you for this film. He's very decisive about his leading men. He always knows who they're going to be. What did he tell you about why you?
Well, to my surprise, he watched all of Normal People, which is surprising to me, but also the more I know him, the less surprising that gets. Like, he just consumes everything. Like, you ask him to watch something and he'll watch it within the next day and you'll talk about it 48 hours later. So thankfully he's, as you said, decisive and had a feeling in his gut.
And what was that feeling?
I don't. It's probably a question for him, but I think
he didn't tell you.
He didn't tell me what it was about the show or
you
or me. But I think it's a hard thing to quantify, because I think even if you watch Normal People, it doesn't give you an indication that I'm going to be able to roll around in the Coliseum and do the kind of physical side of things. But we spoke a lot about sport in the half an hour Zoom that we had, and I think he's intuitive, and I think whatever it was, I think a casting for the most part just requires a kind of gut response and instinct for the most part, I think.
I'd forgotten about the sport thing. Of course, you were a very good, and I'm no doubt you still are, but you were obviously a very good sportsman in your youth.
Back in the day, yeah.
That's a terrible thing to say now that you're really old. Yeah. Was that an important part of that, the physicality of your sport?
I think so. Whether it's obviously a different thing to learn the sword play, but I do think it gives you an indication. A kind of physical robustness is important, because it's just about being able to take the impacts. Because no matter how choreographed it is, you're still hitting the ground, and the way that Ridley shoots, because he's shooting on 8 to 12 cameras in those fight sequences, so you're not really getting a stunt double in, because you're kind of constantly on camera. So it does require a kind of comfortability being uncomfortable. Yeah.
We know from your previous performances that you have an extraordinary ability to convey vulnerability as well as other qualities. But were you sure you could also convey the strength, and the characters talk about the rage of Lucius?
Well, I think the rage is a symptom, right? Like, I don't think it's interesting if you play a character just angry, but the point being that, because it was written in the script the whole time, like, there's this rage inside him, and I was like, the rage is a symptom of something that is more familiar to me, as you said, in other, there's a vulnerability to what he feels about his mother, him losing his wife. So the symptoms of that result in this kind of gnawing rage and this desire to. He's incredibly anti-establishment and wants to tear it down at the seams.
It's funny, because I didn't read your performance as rage, although the characters talk about it. I read it as love, the absolute devotion to those women.
Yeah, no, and it's about hurt. It's like, if you look at what the Roman Empire did historically to all of these kind of territories, Lucius is an example, and he's a subject of that, and loses everything as a result of the thing that he once belonged to. So I think that I'm glad that you saw it that way, that there's a lot of kind of water moving under the bridge for him, and it makes it complicated to watch, I hope.
It does make it complicated. Now, did Ridley Scott want your character to have a relationship with Russell Crowe's character?
No. Did Ridley want?
Did he want there to be a continuity between?
I think he wanted it insofar as a genetic, or something in his DNA, it's written into the screenplay, we have similar gestures. But Lucius isn't aware of that for the vast majority of the film. So I think Ridley would say this himself, that I think he wanted a distance in order for those kind of moments where the gap is bridged to feel potentially more profound or more interesting.
I read that you didn't speak to Russell Crowe beforehand. You had seen the film as a teenager.
Many times, yeah.
Did you then study the role again, or just take what you already had?
No, I think I took, it kind of ties to the previous point that Lucius isn't aware of it, but also that Russell's performance is so iconic that you can remember so much of it. Like I've seen that film 4 or 5 times purely as a fan, but once I was cast in it, I wanted to not watch it. Like in a similar way, like when I was playing Stanley in Streetcar Named Desire, the minute I was cast in it, I haven't gone back and watched the film.
And what is that about? Why don't you want to watch either Marlon Brando in Streetcar or Russell Crowe in Gladiator?
Because I think ultimately, I think you're doing the writing and the performances that have preceded you a disservice. Because your job is not to copy or anything of the sort. Your job is to kind of, your job is to create something new and fresh.
A very different experience, I imagine, going onto a set of a big film like that compared to the previous films you had done. Just tell us a little bit about day one. Makes me nervous just thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who's seen the film, it's huge. The film and the sets are as big as anything that I've experienced. Like films like this are uncommon nowadays because there's very minimal blue screen. It's all practical. So what you're seeing on screen is kind of what our eyes were taking in on the day. And Ridley doesn't suffer any fools or any kind of wasting of time or anything that feels like superfluous to the central idea about filming, which is making a film. So he kind of, in his own way, is incredibly disarming and just goes, right, we're going to work now. Nerves are no good to me. Let's not waste any time with kind of any apprehension. Yeah.
Fine.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. Did you have any doubts? Actors, of course, must have doubts about their ability, but did you have any doubts about your ability to fill that very big stage?
Not so much to do with that. I think I struggle with the voice in my head the whole time, inside and outside work. But it's never it wasn't specifically to do with the scale. It's always some sort of fear that the job that you love doing isn't translating for an audience. Like that's always if I was to reduce it down to something simple like that, it's always that kind of niggling voice. But in terms of, I don't think you can play scale. Do you know, like just because the film's bigger doesn't mean that my job is different. But of course, there's an apprehension with doing something new in a different genre. So, but the anxiety is consistent, which actually is weirdly comforting, if that makes sense.
Does the comparison with a previously very, yes, successful, but also great film in lots of ways, with a marvellous performance at the centre of it, or performances, but particularly Russell Crowe, does comparison, the notion of comparison, bother you?
Does the notion of comparison bother me? I think it's interesting because we're kind of at the precipice of this kind of press tour, and I'd be so curious to know what it was like for them when the film was initially coming out, because now there's this talk about this legacy with the first film, and I think they have probably the great privilege of, at the time, that the legacy with that film didn't exist. They were just promoting a film as they would any other film. So I think there's no comparison right now in terms of what Russell did, because that performance that we're talking about it 25 years on because of the standard of it and what he achieved. So it's not me kind of deflecting from the answer, but to compare something in its infancy, which is before the film even comes out, feels slightly redundant, because so maybe we'll touch base in 25 years and see See how it
See how
all
you
holds
feel
up.
about it.
Yeah.
I read that you're not drawn to the trappings of fame or the idea of being famous. In fact, you kind of don't particularly like it. I read. So, are you prepared for what comes next?
I think I'm aware of what the map of all of this could potentially look like and what it's felt to date. There's some great privileges that come with it. I get to do this job that I love. To be financially secure in this industry, full stop. To come from the background that I come from, and now to have this kind of freedom within it all, are the positive sides. I don't like a lot of the things that come with it, but you kind of want to have some degree of. I think you need to be reserved with your comments, because it is very much a first world problem that, like, I think I can deal with it, but I just don't think I have the emotional acumen to deal with some of the public facing sides of things.
We can talk about that in 5 years' time. And just to come back to your role, because that's what I'm most interested in. So I said before that we've observed you giving performances of great finesse around people who are able to be vulnerable. I'm not saying it's absent from this film, but you still had to find a different kind of masculinity. I think.
Yeah.
He's a fighter.
Yeah.
How did you find that?
That was really fun, because it's like whenever there's a new challenge in front of you, like there's something, I would say, kind of traditionally leading man in the texture of what's being asked. And also it's like this film isn't an action film, but it's very, it's action heavy for sure. So to kind of exercise different muscles in that regard was really just something I hadn't done before, and then finding these kind of islands of performances, parts of the performance that felt familiar to me. So like those kind of scenes with my mother or scenes with Denzel, where you kind of have these opportunities to lean into the performance style that is more familiar to me, while at the same time, like after lunch going and then fighting baboons or 100 men in the Colosseum. So it was a fun challenge in that regard. This
is a big ask. Do you think that you actually give... We're talking so much about masculinity and what's good and bad masculinity and what's healthy, and there's a lot of bad role models, we know that.
Yeah.
Do you think you do have the opportunity to convey something very special to men? Because you are both things in this role. You are vulnerable, you are strong.
That's interesting. I think this is a very specific period of history where I think Lucius is being asked to exercise his masculinity in a very active way. So whether it's applicable today, I'm not sure, but I think what we are seeing is somebody how this hurt man can manifest that hurt in a very kind of violent and active way. And also he's living in a totally different cultural context where they were emotions that had to be activated in order to survive. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Lucius is a role model for today's man, but it's yeah.
Did it help that you look Roman?
I think it did. Or Ridley says that when he was watching Normal People, he was like, oh, he kind of looks like Richard Harris, which thankfully was in the world of Marcus Aurelius of the first film. So, yeah, thankfully that panned out.
I bet they weren't saying that at Maynooth post-primary.
No. That was the bane of my life in school. So I'm very thankful that the Roman nose has come in useful now.
That the world that it turned into a great thing.
Yeah.
Paul Mescal, getting your name right, 2 out of 2.
2 out of 2. Yeah.
Congratulations on the film, and thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much. Thanks.